You know, there's something fascinating that happens when someone with a powerful aura walks into a room. They don't even have to speak. They don't need to announce themselves. There's no need for a grand gesture or a commanding tone. They simply exist, and that existence shifts the energy of the space around them. People notice, people turn, and more often than not, people start to feel a little uncomfortable. Not because you've done something wrong, but because your very presence upsets something in them that they can't quite name. Now, this isn't about arrogance or ego. It's not about walking around believing you're better than anyone else. In fact, if you truly possess this kind of energy, this kind of depth, you're probably the least likely to be thinking about superiority at all. What you're carrying is a quiet kind of power, a groundedness, a sense of inner clarity that calls into question all the facades people have carefully constructed to make themselves feel. When your aura is that strong, it speaks louder than words. It communicates that you know who you are, that you're not waiting for external validation to tell you whether you're acceptable or worthy. And in a world where most people are desperately trying to be liked, trying to fit in, trying not to say the wrong thing or stand out too much, your mere existence becomes a kind of quiet rebellion. This is why some people are intimidated by you before they even know your name. They can feel something in you that they haven't resolved in themselves. You walk in carrying years of pain that you've turned into wisdom, struggles that you've alchemized into resilience, experiences that didn't break you, but shaped you. They feel that even if they don't understand it, and it unnerves them. Because you're calm in the face of chaos, your unshakable sense of presence reminds them of their own inner instability. They see someone who doesn't flinch, who doesn't shrink, who doesn't bend just to be accepted, and it stirs something inside them. Awe, envy, fear, sometimes all three. And then comes the judgment. Who does she think she is? Why is he so quiet? They're too intense. People will start to assign labels to you, not because you fit those labels, but because they need to explain to themselves why they feel uneasy around you. They're not really talking about you. They're talking about the mirror you've just become for them. You've exposed something. And that exposure is uncomfortable. This kind of energy will often draw polarizing responses. Some people will be magnetized to you almost instinctively. They'll want to learn from you, stand near you, absorb something of what you have, not even fully understanding what it is. Others, though, will pull away. They'll avoid eye contact. They'll talk about you when you leave the room. They'll bristle at your opinions. Not because you were wrong, not because you were aggressive, but because you were clear. And clarity, for people who thrive on confusion or denial, is threatening. That's the irony of it. People think they want honesty, think they want confidence, think they want truth, until it's standing in front of them without apology. Then suddenly it's too much, and you're too much. But the truth is, you're not too much. You're just clear. You're just aligned. You're just unapologetically existing in a way that doesn't rely on approval. It's not easy being that person. It can feel lonely. You start to question yourself. Why do people treat me this way? Why do I feel like I don't belong? But let me tell you something. The discomfort you're causing isn't your fault. It's not even about you. It's about what you represent. You represent possibility. You represent change. You represent someone who cannot be easily defined, boxed, or manipulated. And that kind of presence disturbs the equilibrium that people have worked so hard to maintain, no matter how fragile or false that equilibrium may be. You're the reminder that something more is possible, that someone can live from a place of integrity and not just performance, that someone can walk into a room and not need to dominate it, yet still lead it with their energy alone. So the next time you feel the tension when you arrive, the whispers, the strange stares, or the cold shoulders, don't shrink. Don't apologize for taking up space. Recognize it for what it is, a natural response to the presence of someone who has done the work to know who they are. You know, there's a kind of discomfort that surrounds someone who speaks the truth plainly. Not aggressively, not arrogantly, just plainly. And that discomfort doesn't come from the person speaking, it comes from the people listening, people who deep down already know the truth, but aren't quite ready to confront it. There's a certain weight in telling the truth, not just any truth, not superficial facts or surface level honesty, but the kind of truth that cuts through the noise, the kind that looks through the mask and touches something raw. When you carry that in your aura, when your presence is rooted in that kind of clarity, you become, whether you want to or not, a kind of lightning rod. Because the truth, when spoken, doesn't just inform, it exposes. Now, most people aren't afraid of hearing the truth because it's wrong. They're afraid of hearing the truth because it's right, because it forces them to see things they've spent years avoiding. When you speak from that place of inner alignment, when you call things what they are instead of what people wish they were, you disrupt the comfort of illusion. You become unsettling, not because you're trying to be difficult, but because you're being honest. There is a reason people flinch when someone tells the truth with certainty. It reminds them that they've been compromising, that they've been accepting less, that they've been tolerating falsehood in their relationships, their work, their values, their very selves. And then you come along and you say something simple, direct, unembellished, and it lands like a thunderclap. They don't know what to do with it, so they deflect. They criticize. They accuse you of being too harsh, too intense, too judgmental. But that reaction isn't about the delivery, it's about the disruption. You didn't create the chaos, you just refused to participate in the illusion. And that refusal, that's power. And that's what gives your aura its gravity. You carry with you the strength to see things as they are, not as we prefer them to be. And in doing that, you shine a light into corners others have left in the dark. Most people don't understand how rare that is. We live in a culture that rewards appearance over substance, diplomacy over authenticity. And while those things have their place, there comes a point where truth must be spoken clearly, directly, and without apology. People who speak the truth are often misread. They're not cruel, they're not cold. In fact, they're often the ones who care the most because they care enough to risk discomfort for the sake of clarity. And here's the thing, when you speak the truth, you're not just changing conversations, you're challenging the foundation. You're inviting people to see reality without their preferred filters. You're offering them a way out of the patterns that keep them small. That's not offensive, it's transformative. But transformation for many is terrifying. This is why people who speak the truth often find themselves alone in rooms full of noise, misunderstood, resisted, sometimes even vilified. But if you carry that kind of aura, if your words tend to pierce rather than please, understand this, you're not broken. You're just further down the path. You've seen what happens when we lie to ourselves. You've lived through the consequences of silence. And so you speak not to wound, but to wake. It's not an easy role to play. Sometimes you'll lose people, sometimes you'll be the outsider. But over time, what you also notice is that those who are ready will begin to gather. Because your truth creates space for their own. Your clarity becomes permission. They see you standing in your integrity and something in them says, maybe I can too. So don't silence yourself to protect their illusions. Don't dilute your clarity so others can stay confused. If your words stir discomfort, let them. That discomfort is the beginning of change. It means you've touched something real. It's a strange thing, isn't it? How the world claims to celebrate uniqueness, yet at the same time punishes it the moment it walks into the room. We're told from a young age to be ourselves, to follow our own path, to stand out. But the moment you actually do, the world begins to push back. You become different. You become hard to relate to. People can't quite place you, can't predict you, can't contain you. And so they begin to distance themselves from you, not because you're flawed, but because you don't fit the script they've grown comfortable following. Now, the thing is, you're probably not even trying to stand out. That's the part people misunderstand. You're not looking for attention. You're just being. You're simply aligned with yourself. But alignment in a misaligned world is almost always perceived as rebellion. And rebellion makes people nervous. When they look at you, they don't just see you. They see everything they've compromised to be accepted. And suddenly your mere presence becomes a challenge. You don't need to say a word. You don't need to prove anything. Your being is the statement. You've likely experienced the isolation that comes with this, walking into groups where you feel like an outsider, being the one who sees things differently, thinks differently, approaches life from a different vantage point. And over time, that kind of experience can wear on you. You start to wonder, is there something wrong with me? Why can't I just be like everyone else? Why do I feel so separate from the crowd? But here's the truth. Your separation is not a curse. It's a calling. You weren't made to echo, you were made to resonate. And resonance has a different kind of power. It reaches people beneath the surface, often without them realizing it. And yes, sometimes they'll reject it. But other times, that energy, that distinction will plant a seed. It will give someone else permission to start questioning, start waking up, start seeing more clearly. The problem with conformity is that it's comfortable. It gives people the illusion of safety. But the danger is that in that safety, people trade away their individuality. They trade away their voice, their intuition, their authenticity. And then someone like you walks in, not to judge, not to preach, just to exist. And suddenly the cracks in that illusion begin to show. You don't fit in because your soul remembers what it's like to be free, because you've made choices that most people are afraid to make. You've prioritized truth over approval, growth over belonging, integrity over convenience. And those choices shine through you, whether you're aware of it or not. There will be people who misunderstand you, people who label you as difficult, aloof, strange, or too intense. Don't internalize that. Those labels are not reflections of who you are. They're reflections of how others feel in the presence of someone who refuses to shrink. And they say far more about the person using them than they do about you. You'll also notice something else. The more comfortable you become with not fitting in, the more powerful your presence becomes. Because you stop chasing validation. You stop compromising just to be accepted. And when that happens, people start to follow your lead, not because you ask them to, because your example is liberating. It gives others permission to stop pretending, to stop performing, to stop editing themselves for the sake of belonging. So no, you don't fit in. And that's not a flaw. That's the mark of someone who's living honestly, authentically, fully. It takes courage to carry that kind of energy. It takes strength to be the one who walks their own path even when the crowd is moving in the opposite direction. There's something deeply unsettling to people when they feel seen, really seen. Not flattered, not complimented, not praised, but seen when someone stands in front of them and reflects back what's actually there, not the curated version they present to the world. That's what happens when your aura is powerful. You become a mirror, not intentionally, not manipulatively, but naturally. Because the clarity you've worked for, the alignment you live in, forces the people around you to confront themselves. often without a word being said. Most people spend their lives trying to avoid that kind of confrontation. They construct identities, layer upon layer to hide behind. They shape themselves into what the world finds acceptable. They wear masks, perform roles, say what they're supposed to say, and act how they're supposed to act, all in the pursuit of approval and comfort. And it works to a degree until someone like you walks in. Someone who's not wearing the mask, someone who's chosen truth over performance, someone who, by simply being in the room, disrupts the unspoken agreements everyone else is clinging to. You're not doing it to be provocative. You're not doing it to call anyone out. In fact, you might not be doing anything at all. Just standing there, just listening, just observing. And still, the energy shifts. Because your presence demands authenticity. You don't even have to ask questions. Your very existence is the question. Who are you really when no one's watching? What are you hiding? What haven't you faced yet? That's the kind of power that can't be faked. And it's also the kind of power that often leads to misunderstanding. People project onto you. They assume you're judging them, analyzing them, that you think you're better than them. But the truth is you're just present. You're just grounded. You're just unwilling to play a role. And that stillness, that authenticity is more confrontational than any lecture or debate could ever be. It's like this. When someone looks in a mirror, they expect to see a reflection that flatters them. But when that mirror reflects something real, something raw, they flinch. They look away. Or worse, they try to break the mirror. Not because the mirror is cruel, but because it reveals too much. And that's what your energy does. It reveals. It exposes. It peels back layers people aren't ready to let go of. Now, not everyone responds with resistance. Some people, when they feel seen by you, will be drawn in because deep down they're craving that kind of honesty. They're tired of the surface. They're tired of pretending. And when they meet someone who offers them space to be real, someone who doesn't flinch at their truth, begin to open. Your energy becomes a catalyst, not because you're fixing them, but because you're allowing them. And that allowance is rare. It's sacred. But the others, the ones who aren't ready, will feel threatened. They might lash out, they might gossip, they might avoid you altogether. Don't take it personally. They're not reacting to you. They're reacting to the version of themselves they've been trying not to see, the one that you brought to the surface without even trying. This is why walking with this kind of aura can be lonely at times. You're not just living your life, you're unintentionally pulling people into a deeper reckoning with themselves. And that's not always welcome. Most people want validation, not vision. They want comfort, not clarity. But you don't know how to offer anything less than what's real. You don't know how to dim your perception. You've seen too much. You've felt too much. You've come too far. And yes, it's heavy. But it's also necessary because this world doesn't need more people who pretend to be nice while hiding their truth. It doesn't need more shallow interactions or hollow affirmations. It needs people who can see, who can reflect, who can invite others into a higher level of honesty, not by force, not through shame, but through presence, through example. You're a mirror, and that means sometimes people will turn away. But it also means you'll be the one they remember. You'll be the one who left an imprint, the one who helped them begin, even if they didn't know it at the time. There's something undeniably potent about someone who carries peace with them. Real peace, not the forced kind, not the kind that's performative or pasted on like a smile in a photo. I'm talking about the kind of peace that doesn't waver when things go sideways, the kind that holds its center when chaos knocks at the door. That kind of peace is rare. And when you've got it, when it radiates from your presence, it tends to unsettle people more than you might expect. They'll feel it before they understand it. Maybe they'll get nervous around you. Maybe they'll start talking too much or not at all. Maybe they'll get defensive over something small, not because you said anything wrong, but because your calm presence just highlighted how far away they are from that same calm. And here's the key part. Your peace exposes their unrest. That's what they're reacting to. Now, you didn't come into the room to be a mirror. You didn't walk in to disturb anyone. But the peace you carry doesn't just soothe, it also reveals. It reveals where others are fragmented. It reveals where they've sacrificed their center for approval, for distraction, for speed. You slow everything down just by being there. And for those who are ready for that kind of clarity, it's magnetic. For those who aren't, it's uncomfortable. You'll find that some people are drawn to your stillness like moths to a flame. They won't know why they feel safe around you, why they open up, why they suddenly start talking about things they've never said out loud before. It's not what you said, it's what you didn't say. It's the silence in you that makes room for something real to emerge in them. But there's another side to that. Others won't like it. In fact, they might resent it. Because your lack of panic, your ability to remain unshaken, makes them feel exposed, makes them feel judged, not because you judged them, but because in your stillness, they met their own noise. You'll see it in subtle ways. People trying to provoke you to get a reaction, people interpreting your calm as arrogance, people claiming you're too serious or too quiet or distant. But really what they're saying is, I know how to sit with myself when you're not distracting me. That's not your responsibility to fix. You're not here to perform. You're not here to dance around other people's discomfort. When your peace is hard-won, when it's built from years of wrestling with your own storms, from losses you've endured, from truths you've had to swallow, it becomes sacred. And you don't throw it away just to make others comfortable. You don't trade your calm just to be liked. The moment you start diluting your presence to fit into noisy places, you lose the very thing that makes your presence matter. It's a strange paradox. The more grounded you are, the more unshakable your inner world becomes, the more others will project onto you. They'll confuse stillness with indifference, silence with judgment. They'll try to pull you into their drama, their chaos, their patterns, just to feel like they're on familiar ground again. But you didn't come this far to be pulled back into storms you've already outgrown. You've learned how to anchor yourself, how to return to your breath, how to choose your response instead of reacting, how to stay with discomfort without letting it define you. That's not passive, that's not weak, that's mastery. So when people push against your peace, remember this, it's not about you, it's about what your presence brings up in them. And if you try to make everyone comfortable, you'll end up abandoning the very thing that made you different to begin with. Stand in it, guard it, let it do what it does. You don't need to explain your calm. You don't need to justify your presence. Those who are ready for that kind of energy will find you. The rest will either adjust or they'll walk away. Either way, you stay rooted. There's something that happens when you've been through enough, not just enough in terms of experience, but enough in the way that reshapes you. You carry a different kind of weight in your presence. It's not heavy in a burdensome way, it's not dramatic, but it's undeniable. People feel it when you walk into the room, when you speak, even when you're silent. That energy, that gravity, it comes from depth, and depth is earned. Most people don't understand the kind of transformation that's possible through pain, through solitude, through trial. They think strength comes from performance, from bravado, from volume, but real strength is quiet. It's not desperate to be seen. It doesn't need to dominate a conversation. It doesn't scream. It anchors. It grounds. And when you've lived through enough, when you've faced your own darkness, when you've held yourself together while everything around you fell apart, you become that anchor. You don't have to pretend anymore. You've already passed through fire, and you've come out on the other side, not untouched, but refined. That kind of presence, that inner gravity, it unsettles people who haven't been there yet, because what you carry within you speaks to something they haven't faced in themselves, and they can feel it, even if they don't know what to name it. It's intimidating, not because you're trying to be intimidating, but because you remind people that there's another level to existence, one that demands more from them than they've been willing to give. You walk into a room and they feel it. They feel the stillness, the authority. And it's not about status or knowledge or charm. It's about embodiment. You're not speaking theory, you're living it. And when someone who's only been skating along the surface meets someone who's moved through the depths, the difference is jarring. There's no pretense, no mask, just presence. And that presence shakes something loose in them. They might try to figure you out. They might think you're intense or reserved or mysterious. But what they're really sensing is that you don't need their approval. You're not playing their game. You've seen too much, lived too much, lost too much to ever go back to pretending. And people who are used to others playing roles don't quite know what to do with someone who's stopped performing. There's a price to that kind of authenticity. You lose people, you lose opportunities, you get misunderstood, but what you gain is worth far more. Integrity, clarity, depth. You learn to trust yourself in a way others can't fake. And in that trust, you become immovable, not rigid, but solid, not closed off, but sure. And in a world full of noise and anxiety and distraction, that kind of person stands out. That kind of aura, calm, grounded, unshaken, disturbs the equilibrium of people who rely on external validation to feel whole. What you have, they want. But they want it without the work. They want the peace without the discipline, the clarity without the confusion, the strength without the struggle. And so when they meet someone who has done the work, it either inspires them or it threatens them. There's something about being awake in a world that prefers sleep. Not the physical kind, though that too, but the deeper, more pervasive kind. The kind of sleep that cloaks the soul, that numbs the spirit, that keeps people locked into cycles they never question, repeating patterns they don't even realize they're repeating. Most people don't want to be disrupted. They want smooth, they want predictable. They want to stay in the narrative that's been handed to them, even if that narrative is slowly suffocating them, because at least it's familiar. And then there's you. You walk in with awareness, not a rehearsed set of opinions or intellectual platitudes, but an actual presence that's alert. You're not playing along. You're not nodding when you don't agree. You see beyond the surface. You catch what's unsaid. You notice what's real even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's uncomfortable. And that level of awareness, it changes things. Because when someone who's awake steps into a room full of people who are asleep, the air shifts. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, but it's immediate. People feel it. And they don't always like it. You don't even have to say anything. Your energy alone disrupts the unspoken agreements. You're not buying into the same illusions. You're not pretending. And that refusal to play along, oh, that's powerful. That's unnerving. You might find yourself in conversations where people suddenly get defensive around you, even though you didn't challenge them. Or you ask a simple question that throws the entire dynamic off balance. It's not because you're being difficult. It's because your presence exposes what's been left unexamined. Your awareness, Your ability to see becomes a mirror, and mirrors make people nervous when they haven't looked at themselves in a long time. You become the one who can't be fooled. Who doesn't laugh at the joke everyone else finds funny because you know it's rooted in insecurity? Who doesn't go along with the narrative because you know it's based in fear, not truth? And suddenly, that makes you dangerous. Not because you remind people of how much they've settled. They'll say you're too intense, that you think too much, that you're not fun anymore. What they mean is you've stopped numbing yourself in the ways they still do. You've stopped pretending. You've stopped distracting yourself with the same games they're still trying to win. And now being around you reminds them of how asleep they still are. Awareness is not always comfortable. In fact, it rarely is. It demands responsibility. It forces you to own your part in the dysfunction. It pulls back the curtain on the stories you've used to justify your pain, your choices, your stagnation. And that kind of seeing, that deep, raw kind of seeing, requires strength. Not the kind of strength that needs applause, the kind of strength that can sit quietly in truth even when it costs you connection, approval, or ease. That's what you carry, a quiet, steady, uncomfortable kind of seeing. And the truth is, not everyone wants to be seen in that way. Some people will distance themselves from you, not because you've done anything wrong, but because your presence makes it harder for them to keep lying to themselves. And that's not your fault. That's not your burden to carry. You're not meant to dim that awareness just to make others feel safe in their sleep. You're not here to pretend you don't notice the cracks in the facade. You're not here to nod along with things you don't believe in. That would be a betrayal of the very thing you've worked so hard to embody. There's a loneliness to being awake. That's the part they don't tell you. Because once you start seeing clearly, you can't unsee, you can't go back. You can't make small talk in the same way. You can't laugh at the same things. You can't engage in the same dynamics without feeling the hollowness of them. And sometimes that makes you feel separate, like an outsider in a world that runs on illusion. But that separation isn't punishment. It's proof. Proof that you've evolved. Proof that you're no longer asleep. Proof that you're not willing to trade truth for belonging. And in time, the right people will recognize you, not because you've explained yourself, but because they've been through the same fire. They've woken up too. You don't need the crowd to understand you. You just need the courage to keep seeing, even when it's easier not to. And when the world starts shaking, when the masks fall off, when the illusions finally collapse under their own weight, it's the awake ones they'll turn to. It's the ones who stop paying attention. There's a kind of pressure that comes with carrying standards, real standards, not the ones people post about to look admirable, but the ones they live by when no one's watching. You know the kind I mean. You hold yourself to a higher level in how you speak, in how you show up, in what you expect from yourself and others. And whether you realize it or not, that alone is disruptive. We live in a time where compromise is normalized, where good enough is often seen as sufficient, where mediocrity is protected, even celebrated, because it's comfortable. It doesn't ask too much. It doesn't challenge. But when you walk into that environment with a different posture, one of self-respect, of precision, of discipline, people feel it. They sense it in how you move, how you speak, how you make decisions. You're not cutting corners. You're not playing the short game. And that alone creates friction. You see, when you hold yourself to high standards, you also begin to expect it, or at least hope for it, from those around you. Not out of arrogance, but out of principle. You've come to learn that when you compromise your values to avoid discomfort, the price is always greater than the momentary relief. So you stop doing it. You stop lowering your expectations to keep others comfortable. You stop saying yes when everything in you is saying no. You stop laughing at what you don't find funny, agreeing with what you don't believe, tolerating what you know is wrong. And when you do that, people notice. Some admire it, even if they don't know how to say it. Others, though, feel threatened because your refusal to compromise reveals their willingness to. Your discipline exposes their slack. Your clarity makes their confusion harder to justify. And that makes you a mirror again. A standard they didn't agree to, but now have to reckon with. You're not demanding perfection, but you are living with integrity. And that has weight. That weight shows up in how you speak the truth when silence would be easier. In how you walk away from relationships, from jobs, from habits that no longer serve your highest self. In how you pursue excellence even when no one's clapping. In how you say, that's not good enough, not from ego, but from respect. Respect for yourself, for your craft, for what life has given you the responsibility to do. You become the person others second-guess themselves around, not because you shame them, real standards never do that, but because your example raises the bar. It invites something higher. And not everyone wants to rise to that. Some would rather you lower the bar so they can avoid the discomfort of growth. But that's not your job.